I want you to consider doing something that scares you. What kind of resources do you think you would need to accomplish it? So when I've asked people this question before, here's a short list of some of the things people have said: time, money, energy, etc. The reason I've highlighted energy on this slide is that what I've observed in my coaching practice is that there's this psychological inertia that happens when we try to do things outside our comfort zone. I call this the energy hump. Now, the less energy we have, the harder it is to get over the hump. In fact, science supports this observation. Our physiology is a little bit against us when it comes to stepping outside our comfort zones. Now, I love neuroscience, and I promise not to venture too far down that wormhole because I get kind of I really geek out on this kind of thing. But just to dip our toes in the water for a moment and just give you a really little small amount of context, our brains are the most energy expensive organs in our body. Believe it or not, it actually takes us about 320 calories per day just to think. The other thing is that our brains and our bodies have developed very efficient ways of utilizing energy. It's actually really, really cool. And one of the ways that our brains have come up with for conserving energy is by having a bias to go down familiar neural pathways in the brain. So you can kind of imagine it as like the brain has an option of going down two paths. It can take the familiar path where, it's been down this pathway before, there's not too much that's unknown, you know what to expect. But there's also not a lot of opportunity for new and exciting opportunities to come in. Or the brain could choose to go down the unfamiliar pathway where there's potentially more opportunity. But when you go down an unfamiliar pathway, the brain has to stay more alert because there's more risk associated with that. There could be potentially things that come up that it wasn't anticipating. So the brain has to be more alert when it goes down the less familiar pathway. And that alertness costs energy. So this is exactly what happens when we do things outside our comfort zone. We're going down that less familiar pathway, and that takes energy. So if we continue this line of thinking, more physical energy means that we're better resourced to step outside our comfort zone. And since physical health leads to physical energy, this slide gives a quick spot check to see how you are doing in terms of your own physical health. So I'm going to invite you now just to get out your pen and paper and give yourself a score out of 10 in terms of how you're doing in each of these three categories. So if you gave yourself a score of 1, that would mean you're doing absolutely terribly, everything's going wrong. If you gave yourself a score of 10, you're doing amazing and there's no room for improvement. So I'll just give you 10 seconds just to write that down and give yourself a score out of 10 in each of those three categories. Okay. The next thing I want you to consider is, what is one micro action? So a micro action is an action that takes 30 seconds or less. What is one micro action that if you did it consistently, it would lead to an overall increase in your score? So just I'll give you, a few seconds just to consider that and write that down. Now, my invitation is that you consider doing that small action, sometime in the next 24 hours, starting to create a little bit of momentum for yourself in terms of building up your physical energy. If you are interested in creating more micro habits for yourself and interested in this particular framework, I highly recommend a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's a great book. He talks about how to integrate micro habits into your life and how you can start to build momentum from micro habits. I also wanted to mention an honorary mention here goes out to Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith. She's done a lot of work in terms of the 7 types of rest. I'm not sure if you're familiar. She's done a TED talk. She's also got a great article. There's a lot of information on the internet about sleep and sleep hygiene, not so much about other types of rest. And Dr. Dalton Smith's work talks about that. And she talks about how rest and different types of rest can feed into building energy. So if you're interested, I'm also going to send a resource list after our session today. So you'll have all of these resources at your fingertips if you want to explore and dive deeper.